Hey everybody, Pastor JD here. I'm just going to walk you through the sermon text that I am preaching this Sunday. This is for the phrasing students primarily, but if it's helpful for other people as well, then that's good. So I have brought up Bible Arc here. I have taken my text, John 1:16 to 18. I've got the Greek here. That's helpful for me, and if it's helpful for you, then great. I will talk about a few things here. And then I've already divided up the text. So I've done a divide here on some of the lines that I've already identified. We'll go through and do this pass one, pass two, and pass three for sure. And then I'll talk more about kind of the overall structure. I am seeing this for the first time. So this is not I have no preparation going into this other than what you've seen here where I've broken up these texts, okay? So let's jump in. Let's first identify the first word here and the first phrase. So I've got a subordinate conjunction for, and I notice it's on the front of the sentence, so I know that it's governing its whole sentence here. And it is telling me how the main phrase of this sentence connects to the main phrase of a sentence that's up above. Okay, and that's in a previous text. So I don't have that previous text in my text. I'm starting with 116. However, if I'm going to preach faithfully, I need to deal with that. Okay, so I need to explain how our text is connected to what came above. So that's something for me to note in my preaching. However, I'm going to ignore it for phrasing because we have nothing to connect it to. All right, so that's our subordinate conjunction governing the sentence. Here is our preposition governing the phrase. Get used to this, guys. Subordinate conjunction first, and then a preposition or another subordinate conjunction or another conjunction talking about the particular phrase. Governs the sentence, this governs the phrase. All right, keep that in mind. That's tough for phrasing students to get. So the from is a preposition, and I'm going to bring that in. It's gonna adverbially connect here to we have all received grace upon grace. So here's our main phrase. We have all received. What have we received from? From his fullness. It's from his fullness we have all received. But the main thing is we've received this. Now, this is tricky here. There's a comma which makes me think that, okay, we read it like, oh, we've received grace. In fact, we haven't just received grace, we've received grace upon grace. But the comma would not be there if this was the object of the verb. You don't put a comma between the object, the direct object, and then the verb. So have we received grace or have we received something else? That's immediately what I'm seeing here. So I come over to my Greek, okay, and say we all have received, okay. So far so good. That's past tense. We've already done it. Um, um, this Kai is normally and, but here is probably more of like an even grace upon grace. So not sure what happened to my movie recording there. So even grace upon grace is probably the best way to handle that. So there's a comma, and then they could have done an even there if they really wanted to capture the Greek. But it's not we've received grace, it's we've received from his fullness. And then even grace upon grace. I don't know. I'm not, to be honest, guys, I'm not sure how to. Here's what I'm going to do with this. And you won't see me do this on this video, but what I'm going to do is go back and look at other translations. I'm going to try to understand this very strange wording here by John. And I don't know. I don't know what to tell you right now. These are mysteries that when you first look at a text, you have more questions sometimes than you have answers. Let's move on, and I will figure out what to do with this later. For, okay, so here's a subordinate conjunction governing its whole sentence. So what I do is I just do the sentence itself first relative to itself. then I will make sure the for connects to up here, because that's what's happening, is this is connecting to this main phrase up here. For the law was given. Okay, the law was given. That's a main phrase. The law was given. I can take this one out for a sec. The law was given. It's got a subject and a verb through Moses. All right. Preposition. Grace and truth. So I've got an ascendaton here. Right? There's no connection there. We have to figure out what that is. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And it's pretty obvious that that's a contrastive, right? That's a but there. It's contrasting the law came through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. It's contrasting Moses and Jesus and what each of them gave. And so no one has ever seen. Okay, sorry, before we do that, let's take this sentence and let's subordinate the whole sentence, and let's yeah, so we'll say that the whole thing is having to do with what we've received, right? So we received because though maybe we could say this, like, although the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ, right? The emphasis here is on the grace and truth coming. There's what we've received. There's who it's come through. It's come through Jesus, which is all explaining, right? This for is really explanatory. Let me explain to you what I mean by from his fullness we have received. What I mean is grace and truth came through Jesus Christ, and that's contrasted with Moses, where it was the law that came through Moses. All right, so I'm just talking out loud here. So no one has ever seen God. We've got another ascendaton here. And then another one here. John is full of ascendatons here. He's full of not clarifying what the connection is. But again, what does that mean? It means there is a connection. We just don't know what it is at first until we look at the context. Arrows. So here's a relative phrase. Who is at the Father's side? The only God who, and I pulled that out of the middle. Who is at the Father's side? He has made him known. All right. So what are we looking at here? Well, we got to figure out this ascendaton first. No one has ever seen God. So I'm trying to figure out now what the seeing God has to do with something up here. Okay, first I'm going to look here before I look here. Okay, is it grounding this? Okay, this is the main statement of this phrase. I know that these two are together, but remember, we're not focused on the law here, right? We're focused on grace and truth coming through Christ. So grace and truth came for no one has ever seen God. Is that right? I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, does the seeing of God connect to the truth? And is the seeing of God, being able to see God or have him be made known, connecting to grace? Okay, because there's kind of a, although no one has ever seen God, the only God has made him known, who is at the Father's side. Okay, this is another funky phrase. We got quite a few funky in English. I think they're working fine. Although this is unique. This is very unique here. This kai karin antikaritos. This is not a normal Greek structure that I see a lot. And here, this is also kind of, I guess it's kind of odd in the Greek too. You've got the only God, that one has made him known. The only God, that one. The only God, the one being at the side of the Father, that one has made him known. So, yeah, just interesting that at this point in John's using some interesting structure in his Greek, and that gets reflected in the English. That's why it's a little choppy in the English. Um, I would put this as an although, like I would contrast it, and I would say this is a subordinate conjunction to this. And I would say for would probably come here. The only God, this is Jesus, the only God. Not not a clear translation here. Monogenes is what oftentimes gets translated the only begotten. So John 3:16. So if I were to pull up here John 3:16, let's see. And then if I give you the Greek, add a text, Greek. Okay, you have monogene. So um, um, that he, that the Son, the only begotten one, or the only one, the unique one, he gave. So um, he gave his Son, his only begotten Son is probably the best way to do that. So monogene this is where we have that word only begotten that occurs sometimes in translations. The ESV went away from it because the problem with it is that it makes it sound like Jesus was born or created. If you guys know your church history, there was the Arian controversy, and Arianism was this idea that Jesus was sort of a created being, lesser than God. And Arius looked at this verse and he says, "Well, look, this verse, it means gene, that's to be born, right? Isn't it? Isn't he born? Isn't he the firstborn or the only born son? Isn't he born then?" And the reality is that this word monogene doesn't quite mean that someone is born just because it has that verb in it. It's kind of like the words butterfly, right, guys? So if you think of butterfly, you think of so a butterfly must have something to do with butter, and it must have something to do with a fly. And the reality is, of course, that's ridiculous. No, it doesn't have anything to do with butter. And I guess the only connection to a fly is that it does fly, right? But why would we call it why would it have anything to do with butter? But if you were to do that in Greek, a lot of times you're going to make mistakes. You're going to think that, like butterfly, that words that seem to contain two ideas in them, you can just link those two ideas together and say, oh, these ideas are both part of it. This does not mean Jesus was born. It probably more means like he was unique, or the only of his class, the only of his kind, but he was it's usually attached to the Son, his role as the Son. So back to our text, I see monogenes, and I'm just going to want to flag that and say only unique. Some would say only begotten, and I'm coming back to that. This is just hey, I've got some theology over here that I need to maybe bring to the congregation, but I need to think through it and do a little more study on it first. So when it says only, the only begotten, some would say, the only begotten God, he has made him known. So that's Jesus. Although no one has ever seen God, Jesus has made God known. Jesus, who was at the Father's side, has made God known. So does that connect to truth? I think it does. I think that this is the truth that Jesus is giving, and I think it's a gracious truth. It's a truth that also supplies grace, because to know God is not simply to know something that's true, but it's to know someone and be united with him and in covenant relationship with him, and that pours grace out upon you. So grace and truth both come as Jesus makes God the Father known, whereas he was not known before or outside of Christ. Oh, there's so much rich theology here. But I'm arguing that the structure is that this for is going to come under that grace and truth came. Something like, tell me more about that, or what do you mean grace and truth came, or why? Well, because the only God, Jesus, has made God the Father known. So why do you say, John, that grace and truth came? Well, because Jesus made the Father known. All right, so that's my take, and then let's give it some arrows. Let's start up here, preposition, and then we got this for, and I'll link to both. Those are adverse or contrastive, however you want to say it. And then it came through Moses, but grace came through Jesus Christ. You can see that parallel structure happening there. And then grace and truth came. Tell me more about that. The only God has made him known. Jesus Christ has made God the Father known, and that is the grace and truth coming to you. And that up above is called fullness. Okay, and then we got one more line here. I think this is like an although or a though no one has ever seen God. Okay, so I think that's going to be a subordinate conjunction going there. All right, so then what I want to do is just look at my structure, right? I want to identify my main phrase. Clearly it's here, right? This one isn't hard to see. It kind of works. This would be a decent one to have in a class. Like, you can see that we got one thing that we're saying here. We have all received. Wow. We haven't. Does it say we've received grace? I don't know. I think we've received from his fullness. We've received him more than we've received grace. I think the idea of his fullness is that you imagine a fountain overflowing, and we receive the overflow of that fountain, right? He's so full that he overflows the bounds. And then we receive him. That's what we receive. When you get hit by the water of a fountain, you are receiving of the fountain, right? So we're receiving what was in the fountain has overflowed to come outside, and we get to receive that from him. We're going to be in the depths of theology. I have a feeling for this one. 4, although the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So I'm trying to again clarify that contrast there. Although the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came. Or the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So we're not interested in the law first and foremost. We're interested in the grace and truth as being connected to what we have received. And he's only bringing Moses in there to say, look, Moses was a human being, and although he was very deeply connected to God, he was able to give you the law. But that's not. But what Jesus gave was something so much more. He gave us the grace to accomplish, the grace to know him, the hearts, the grace which changed our hearts, right? And the truth which our eyes saw and our hearts delighted in that. And we came alive because we saw that truth. And that came through Jesus. Well, what do you mean grace and truth came through Jesus? Well, he is the only God, the only begotten God. He is the one who is the only unique Son of God, which would be the way I probably would clarify that. And he has made God known. He's the way to God. He is the door. He is I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He's the only one who can make the Father known, because nobody has ever seen God. So here, if you want to see God, you see Jesus. And Jesus is at the Father's side, which comes right back to John 1:1, I realize. Okay, John 1:1, and the Word was with God. So John is kind of finishing where he started with this section here. So I've got work to do here, but I'm just thinking, initial thoughts. I've got a main phrase that I definitely see here in the text, and then I've got these three sentences here. I probably am going to do something about, divide that as a main phrase, probably then talk about the contrast between the law and grace and truth, which is happening here. Talk about grace and truth being something that we receive of his fullness. Try to keep these connections going. And then I probably want to talk about how it is only through Christ that we can see God the Father. And then I want to remember to try to tie this back to Christmas, right? We're talking about Advent here, right? What does it mean that Jesus is coming, his coming to this earth, tying to what we celebrate in Christmas? How has that blessed us? How has that poured out grace and truth upon us? And those are all the things that I'm thinking of as I'm going forward with this. But I will leave you guys with that. And I hope that was helpful to you as you guys are considering, your own sermons at some point in the future, and definitely for those guys in the class for your sermons for the class. So have a great day, everybody.